Hello, and welcome to the Card Combo Show with me, Choco Billy.
Hello YouTube. Hello everyone. And welcome back everyone. Hello everyone. Hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Card Combo Show.
Well, here we are, episode 100 of the Card Combo Show. I cannot believe that we're here, but we are nonetheless. It's been funny getting to this point, considering the show started out just as a mind dump of all the stupid combos that I saw happening, or not saw happening, actually, as it turns out, just all the things I saw people not doing, and, you know, that's always kind of been the thing from the beginning, is not meta, not even necessarily even worth playing, but sometimes when I build decks, I don't build them with winning in mind. I sometimes have just this, I have to get off this combo, like, just as long as I get this combo off once, then it was worth it, and you build the deck around that rather than a win con, which sometimes means you have to look at a deck in a completely new way, and I like doing that, but nevertheless, we are here, and thank you guys so much for this, because if it weren't for you all liking my stupid ideas, we wouldn't be here in the first place. So the support that you've all given me over these, what, nearly 3 years? 2019? Yeah, wow, Christ, it's crazy how far we've come. But yeah, thank you everyone so much. But anyway, I digress. This week, I'm going to be looking at old cards, new cards, and everywhere in between. Relm from Opus 11, Sol from Opus 18, Bismarck from Opus 14, Man in Black from Opus 17, Tama from Opus 1, Magic Pot from Opus 4, Arc from Opus 18, Shivalry from Opus 14, Golbez from Opus 14, and Ardyn from Opus 18. Right, so first off we're going to start with Relm. I'm not going to do what I normally do where I read off all the cards' attributes and their abilities. You should know what they do by now, and they're on the screen most of the time I'm talking about them anyway, so if you don't, I don't need to narrate it for you. Anyway, yeah, brings in 2 monsters of 1 and 2. And can bounce, and that's the important thing here, is that people always forget that she has the bounce effect as well. But anyway, yeah, just loads of combos of good things that she can do. So bring in a Yagudo, and then bring in Bomb. That's an instant kill. Pretty good. Now the chances are that you're actually not going to have the right element to then use Yagudo's second ability, which kind of sucks. But at least these are two potentially what's the word I'm looking for? This monsters that will stick around ready for you to get Relm's second effect off as well. But still, Bomb can also become a forward, which is nice, and Yagudo, if you do happen to be in wind water, then you could use Yagudo's second effect as well. Melusine and Goblin. Now this is funny, so you play Melusine onto the field, you get to take control of one of your opponent's forwards, of course 4 or less. You can then use Goblin to give it haste, at which point it can now attack. Obviously the forward will need to be active when you take control of it, but still, maybe your opponent played the forward last turn, you then take control of it this turn, and you only gain control of it until the end of the turn anyway, so it's not that great, but still, getting control of it, and then you'd be able to use Goblin to be able to give it haste, draw yourself a card, and then potentially attack with it. So if it's something quite horrible that your opponent has to deal with, then it might be worth having on your field just for that one turn and that one attack. Ochu and Atomus. Nobody, I mean, there's no real point even mentioning these because everyone plays these cards with Relm, because these are like the 2 best to be able to go for. You bring in Ochu to immediately recur 2 CP, you then play something with that 2 CP to then recur another 2 CP with a Tomos, and even in just like a mono water monsters deck, just having a Tomos there at least is well worth it, because you're constantly playing things for so cheap, and drawing new cards as well, being able to get that 2 CP back as well is fantastic. Goblin and Truss. So this is more referring to Relm's second ability, which is at the end of each of your turns, choose one for dependent controls. If you have 5 or more monsters, return to its own hand. So Tross, when you bounce one of your opponent's forwards, you get to draw a card. You'd bring Tross onto the field, you bring Goblin onto the field. Goblin can then search you another Goblin. Now you can search another of this Goblin. You can play that one, search another one, play that one, search another one. And basically using these 2, provided all your Goblins are in your deck, you can get yourself to 5 Goblins immediately. Obviously you'll need to make sure that you've got the 5, or the 3 additional fire CP for the goblins, or whatever CP you need for another goblin. But either way, you can get yourself 2/5 goblins, draw yourself a decent amount of cards, have enough goblins online to potentially deal 9k something, but pass your turn, you get to bounce something, which then draws your card from Tross as well. Just be mindful of the fact you're milling yourself a lot of cards when you do this. Plan into Biblos. So yeah, you play Flower onto the field, you can then break it to make your opponent discard a card. With Biblos, that then means your opponent will, you can then dull and freeze on your opponent's forwards. You add Vice into the mix, and you then get to dull and freeze one of your opponent's characters as well, which is quite nice. Obviously, Flan can search another Flan, you can play that onto the field, search another one, play that onto the field, so kind of similar to the goblins, but most importantly is that you can then, hopefully the following turn, break 3 Flans, and if you've got Biblos and Vice on the field, dull and freeze 3 characters and 3 forwards, as well as make your opponent discard 3 cards. Obviously, if they don't have 3 cards in hand, then that won't happen, and if they see that setup, chances are they won't finish the turn with 3 cards, but still funny nonetheless. Yagudo and Tonberries. So yeah, obviously Yagudo comes in, sets something to 4, Tonberries comes in, you can then minus 2k it, you then put Tonberries into the break zone, that then kills that forward because its power has been set to 0. Obviously you need to be careful of any modifiers, so things like Inner Crow, for example, which buff everything by 1, or buff every earth forward by 1. On your opponent's field, or your field, depending on who controls it. Or you could potentially play Yagudo onto the field, choose forward A, Tonberries comes in, chooses forward B, you can then pay 1 water and put Tonberries in the break zone to then also choose forward A. So you're still getting the kill with Yagudo and Tonberries, but the entry of Tonberries targets something else. Leviathan, fairly obvious, but people always forget about Relm's second effect, so you get yourself to 5 monsters, you pass turn, and then you get to bounce something, which then also minus 9ks and other opponent's forwards as well. So you get to get rid of 2 of your opponent's forwards, which a lot of people forget about. Not bad. Gao, yep, again, this sounds fairly obvious, but, you know, these two actually, I haven't seen them play that much together in a monster deck. But they either recur you monsters or search monsters out of your deck, both like you to have lots of monsters on the field, so they work nicely. And another card I actually forgot to mention in this as well, that would work really nice with Tross, is Bismarck, because obviously you would pass turn, you get to bounce something back to your hand, you then get to draw a card, but then you can also bounce your opponent's forwards and then get to draw a card off of Tross as well. So yeah, you end up with 3 additional cards in hand, and then you could add Lakshmi into the field, and then you get like 4 cards at the end of your turn. So nice way to be able to carry a lot of stuff to hand. Soul. So yeah, this is a pretty decent card. I'm actually going to read his text out because it's pretty substantial and it is a relative new card, so fair enough you don't know everything about it. But 3 CP 9k Dark Forward. At the beginning of your attack phase during each player's turn, select one of the 3 following actions. If you have received 5 points of damage or more, select up to 3 of the 3 following actions instead. Until the end of the turn, all the forwards you control gain plus 1000 power and brave. All the forwards your opponent control lose 2000 power to the end of the turn, and during this turn your opponent cannot cast summons. So pretty significant. Cindy, so yeah, basically be able to get yourself to 5 damage because your opponent will take you to 4, and then especially if they see Soul come down, they will not take you to 5 until they can kill you. So being able to use something like Cindy, play onto the field, immediately dull one of your opponent's forwards out and take yourself to 5. You can then go to combat and minus 2k plus 1k, no more summons, it's just nasty. And ultimately you could also use it if you want to give Cindy Brave, so you could attack with her and then dull her to then dull one of your opponent's forwards out as well. Barbarossa. This is a combo that wasn't even, I barely call it a combo, just using her S ability, right? But this was barely done even in Opus 2 when she came out. But yeah, Maelstrom allows you to deal each forward your opponent controls damage equal to its power minus 1000. You then go to combat, you choose to minus 2k to your opponent's board, everything dies. Not bad. Bismarck, Lord of the Mist. So being able to give all your forwards Brave is really nice. So say you've got, I don't know, Soul and 3 other forwards on the field. Wind forwards, including obviously Bismarck, you can attack with them, then dull it to be able to deal 2k ping to something, and you can keep on doing that. Now, obviously, in this instance, it actually probably would be better just to go for the minus 2k on stuff. But it depends what you're planning on attacking with and how you're doing it, because if you give Brave, you can attack with that forward and then dull for the ping. Whereas if you minus 2k, that's minus 2k. I mean, that's as good as many forwards as your opponent has. So once your opponent kind of gets to 3 or more forwards, it's probably better to go for the minus 2k than the 1k. But it also depends on how many forwards you've got and whether or not you're going to do stuff with them anyway. Lail. This is funny. So Soul obviously triggers on your opponent's attack phase as well, which is fantastic. So it means that all forwards must attack once per turn, and all forwards must block if possible. So regardless of what's going on each person's turn, just make it so that either your forwards are bigger or their forwards are smaller. They have to attack, you have to block, but the chance are you're killing their forwards because they're smaller than yours. Ardyn, yeah, so this is referring to the during this turn your opponent cannot cast summons. So if you do choose to repeatedly use that ability, your opponent basically will only ever be able to cast summons in their main phase 1 and your main phase 1, even less so in your main phase 1 because it's like 2 triggers. Anything from entering the field or creating a stack on main phase 1, and then the passing of turn to main phase, to the attack phase. So yeah, they don't have many options on when they can cast summons with Soul. So having something like Ardyn on the field so that if they do cast a summon, they have to target him, can become an absolute nightmare. Obviously just be mindful of the fact that there are lots of border wipe summons now as well, so you got stuff like Ixion, for example, which would get rid of both Soul and Ardyn, but still, lots of targeted stuff, quite annoying. Again, White Tiger, let's see, Kunmi, so similar sort of thing, just make it so it's very hard for them to cast summons, so they only have a limited time when they can cast their summons, so making it so that they have to pay an additional 3 with White Tiger, let's see, Kunmi, is just awful. Some people might want to play some quite heavy or powerful summons, but would then, you know, combo that into an attack or something, so they might get some backups back or something other. But forcing them to have to use their summons in main phase 1 can really stifle their ability to use certain abilities. Cecil, similar sort of thing as well. Having to pay 2 for everything. The one downside to this is the fact that paying 2 is a lot easier, but also it's if multiple characters are chosen as well. So if there's a summon which is choosing 2 characters, they still only have to pay the 2. Alright, Bismarck, Lord of the Abyss. Everyone knows what this card does, nothing new here, but Zidane. To be honest, there won't be too many unheard of things here, but it's just, I like Bismarck, I think it's a fun card, so I want to talk about it. But yeah, you play Zidane onto the field, you steal you remove a card from your opponent's hand. Well, you don't even remove it, you put it into the break zone, you know what I mean. And then at the end of the turn, you put Zidane back in your hand, and the following turn you replay it, and you just keep on doing that because that's disgusting. Cerberus, because he's really, really good. Choose one forward, cost 5 or more. 5? It's just 5 or more. Break it, activate all the backups you control, or draw a card. Just being able to reactivate all your backups you control is crazy good. But yeah, it means that you're constantly going to be getting that massive reactivation on your backups. You've also got the option for breaking stuff or drawing a card as well. And given the fact that Bismarck is bouncing it back to your hand, and then you're getting a card off of that as well, not too bad. Charlotta. Now, this is where the fun begins. So obviously you can play her onto the field. She searches you any card from your deck, and you can keep on bouncing it back to your hand, and then keep on replaying her and keep on searching whatever card you want. But what you can do is, let's say hypothetically, you've got Bismarck on the field, and your opponent is never going to kill it, and you have 2 Charlotta in hand. Warp Charlotta past the turn. She has 2 counters, your main phase 1 comes around, you then tick Charlotta down to 1 counter, you then warp Charlotta number 2. You pass your turn. Turn number 3 comes around, and Charlotta number 1 will enter the field. You get to search any card. Search yourself a Charlotta. Charlotta number 2 ticks down to 1 counter, and then you warp the 3rd Charlotta. You pass your turn, and you bounce Charlotta number 1 back to your hand, and you get to draw a card. You then go to your 4th turn, Charlotta number 2 enters the field, searches you any card. Charlotta number 3 goes down to 1 counter, and then you can warp Charlotta number 1 again, and you can just keep on cycling it so that you keep on bouncing a Charlotta back to your hand, getting a card, and every turn a Charlotta's entering the field, searching you anything, and at the end of the turn, bouncing back to your hand and getting a card off of Bismarck. Never going to happen because your opponent will have something to say about it. They will either kill Charlotta or Bismarck or just cancel some effect or whatever. But either way, the fact that it's kind of can happen is hilarious, and I love it. You could maybe, I don't know, let's think about this. There is some way of stopping your opponent from casting summons and interjecting in some way. Might be worth it. Varn, again, everyone knows the play. You play Varn, you get to bounce a Varn back to your hand and replay him if you want, or just bounce him back to your hand so you can then play the win condition Varn to make it so most of your forwards can't be blocked. Sid Hayes, this is fun. I made a little engineer deck recently and it's alright, but I quite like engineers anyway. But ultimately, Sid Hayes enters the field or attacks, he gets to reactivate engineers, which you can combo with any wind forward engineers. So you play Sid Hayes into the field, you dull him and any other wind engineers, and then you get to reactivate them and obviously you're dulling them for Bismarck's effect, and not to mention the fact that you can then attack with Sid Hayes to then reactivate them. So you might have, let's say, Sid Hayes and a couple of other engineer forwards that are wind. You can dull them, deal something 2k, attack with Sid Hayes, reactivate them, dull them again, yeah, whatever. Chelinka, yeah, fairly obvious, but Chelinka, play onto the field, makes a forward can attack twice. You then in turn bounce back the hand, following turn, keep on replaying her, so you've got a forward that can always attack twice. If you combo that with something like Spy Sicilian and, I don't know, Hyo, who is only a 1 CP but can become a 10k that will deal 2 points of damage, you make it so he can attack twice, and Spy Sicilian mean that he can only be blocked by a 1 CP forward. If your opponent can't break him, Chelinka, Bismarck, or Spy Sicilian, which they definitely can, but still, that's 2 turns your opponent's got to live. King Tycoon. Yep, every turn you just keep on bouncing King Tycoon back to your hand, you keep on replaying him back onto the field, you bounce all your opponent's forwards and monsters, and rinse and repeat, your opponent will never have any forwards on the field during your turn except for when you play King Tycoon. Not bad. Ignis. Yeah, so Ignis or Noctis attacks reactivate all your characters, which is bonkers. So that means you can have Bismarck, Ignis, Noctis, and another wind forward. You attack with Ignis, dull all the other wind forwards, they then reactivate. You then attack with Noctis, sorry. You then dull all the wind forwards, and then they reactivate, and then you can dull them again for Bismarck's effect. So you can deal a lot of damage to a lot of different things and have multiple attacks as well. Nasty. Man in Black, I love this card. So yeah, obviously he can remove summon, he can you can cast at any point you want, and when you do cast a summon, you can make it so that a forward cannot attack or block. Kuchulain, this is quite funny. So choose one forward at the beginning of the next main phase 1, put it into the break zone. So you would basically, regardless of whose turn it is, cast Kuchulain, and with Mana Black on the field, you then choose a forward. It cannot attack. Let's say we're doing it on your opponent's turn. Your opponent goes to the attack phase. You cast Kuchulain on a forward you don't want to attack. So on the following main phase, it will be broken, but then you also make it so it cannot attack with Man in Black. So now the opponent's basically just got a dead forward that's, unless they can sacrifice it or use some sort of action ability with it, it's just going to pop in the next main phase. So it cannot attack, cannot block, and is going to die in the next main phase. Not bad. Leviathan, yeah, I mean, this and Amaterasu, just being able to constantly keep on replaying it with Man in Black, having it constantly removed, but constantly be able to be replayed, and if you've got Una on the field, Leviathan is cheaper anyway, regardless of where it is, and even if Man in Black dies, you can still recast these summons. So, yeah, great. Salamander. You cast Salamander, deal 5k to everything. You attack Man in Black, remove Salamander, then you recast it again, deal 5k to your opponent's board, that's a total of 10k, hopefully killed everything. Shiva. I love this card. So if you have 6 Shivas in your break zone, you get to choose 2 forwards, dull and freeze them, and your opponent's got 2 cards. If you build the right kind of deck, it's really easy to do that, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But yeah, being able to just cast a Shiva, dull and freeze 2 things, discard 2 cards. Attack a Man in Black, remove the Shiva, recast it, made your opponent discard 4 cards this turn, and dull and frozen up to 4 forwards as well, and for what is a total of 4 CP, because the card only came from your hand once, the second time it came from your break zone, and you've had to dull 2 ice backups. Not too bad. Ardyn, this is a fun one. So one of the best things about Man in Black as well is that he can just have summons lie in wait in the remove from pile, and this works nicely with Ardyn, or there's the Ramu, which deals 8k to a forward when it enters this turn. But ultimately your opponent can attack, deal your opponent damage, and then see, Ardyn normally would be able to break a forward of 2 or less, but if you take opponent damage, you can break a forward of 4 or less. So if you've got that there waiting, your opponent basically has to take into consideration that when they deal your opponent damage, you will get to break something with Ardyn, and then you can also make it so that your opponent can't block. You can also use this alongside something like Cindy. So you could dull Cindy, choose a forward opponent controls, it becomes dull. Cast Ardyn, obviously you take point damage from Cindy, cast Ardyn, break a forward, and then because you've cast a summon, Man in Black then makes it so a forward cannot block as well. So a nice way to be able to take out 3 of your opponents blocking forwards. Shivalry, so a 2 CP Ice EX with some really awkward text. Yeah, choose one forward until the end of the turn. It gains plus 3000 power, and when a forward your opponent controls is put from the field into the break zone on the same turn that the chosen forward has dealt it damage, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. Right. Squall, obviously, or any fire card forward even that deals border-wide damage, so Susano, you know, that sort of stuff. But Squall's nice because obviously you can potentially be attacking with them twice, but if you're attacking with them twice, your opponent has no cards on hand, and neither do you, which means you had to have cast the Shivalry early anyway, at which point it's not really worth casting Shivalry. But either way, you could cast Shivalry on Squall, deal 4k to the board. If you've got something like Jin on the field, that's 5k. If it kills anything, let's say your opponent's got a couple of forwards on the field that are 5 CP, 5k even, Squall would pop them, at which point your opponent then have to discard a card for each forward that dies to Squall's effect. Annoyingly, it's a really good card to be able to get your opponent to empty their hand, because they might have to discard multiples, but Squall will then be dull, so actually he wouldn't be able to attack a second time anyway, because then he gains Brave. He doesn't reactivate and attack a second time. Prish, so when she enters the field or attacks, she gets to deal her power in damage to something. She chooses a forward and they fight, basically. So you could obviously discard a card and make it so Prish becomes an 8k, or if you discard a card and Prish, she becomes a 10k. But you could cast Chivalry, make her a 9k, which means hopefully she will survive, but then she will also make your opponent discard a card as well. So you're paying a little bit more to cast Chivalry, however, you are potentially breaking something as well, which is quite nice. Sid Highwind. I'm determined to make this card good. So Sid Highwind, obviously, when he deals his, or when he breaks a forward, deals damage to forward and it breaks even, your opponent mills 2 cards. But then you might as well make it so that Chivalry will also make them discard as well. So let's say your opponent attacks, you block with Sid Highwind, you Chivalry him, your opponent's forward gets put into the break zone, they mill 2 cards, discard a card. Not too bad. What's even better, let's combo it with Noctis. So you got Noctis on the field, you play Sid Highwind onto the field, who would deal 8k to something, but then you Chivalry that Sid Highwind, so then he's going to deal like 11k to something, and then your opponent mills 2 cards and discards a card. Not bad. Orc. Yeah, so it might be a case of maybe you've attacked with something like Squall and he hasn't killed the thing, so you then play Orc onto the field just to kill it, and yeah, it's still taking damage from the forward that Chivalry has targeted and then been put into the break zone, which still fulfills Chivalry's effect, so then your opponent discards a card. Firion, so when a forward damaged by Firion is put from the field into the break zone, on the same turn, draw 2 cards. So kind of the opposite of Sid Highwind. It's a nice way for you to be able to just be able to draw 2 cards, but also making it so your opponent then loses a card as well is quite substantial, especially in the card hand difference, because you gain 2 and your opponent lose 1 is really good. And if your opponent is maybe attacking with a party or something, and then you cast Chivalry on Firion and he becomes a 12k, you block 2 of your opponent's forwards and they both die and Firion survives, your opponent discards 2 cards and you get to draw 4. Yeah, not bad. Golbez, so I shouted that, sorry. Yeah, so an interesting card. I really like this card, but I'm not going to go over every good card that he could play onto the field for free, because there's a lot of good 3 costs and 2 costs and 1 costs. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on just some ways that you can make him a bit better, and dull effect just to take control of your opponent's forwards. Hagen, yeah, obviously, so if you've got a water primal on the field, you can look at your top 2 cards, and put 1 to the bottom, but you have to keep 1 on top. So hopefully in those top 2 cards there'll be a forward of 3 or less, which you can then play. Obviously, if there isn't, that's kind of annoying, so that means Golbez is definitely going to whiff, but at least you might be able to put an EX burst up there, even if it isn't something that Golbez could play. Relm, yeah, so being able to search you some monsters onto the field, which you can then put into the break zone, and Relm as well, for Golbez's effect, and take control of one of your opponent's forwards. Not great, admittedly, because Relm is searching 2 cards out of your deck and playing them onto the field, and then you're immediately breaking them. So mill yourself 2 cards, and then break Relm, and then another character as well to take control of one of your opponent's forwards. Not amazing. But with Melusine, it can be quite funny, because you play Relm onto the field with Melusine, you take control of one of your opponent's forwards, and let's say you play one other monster onto the field, and it might be something that when it's put from the field to break, so you gain some sort of effect anyway. Either way, you can then dull Golbez to put Relm, Melusine, the other monster, and the forward your opponent controlled into the break zone to then take control of their other forward. So you've managed to get rid of 2 of their forwards pretty efficiently, and the best thing is you get to keep control of this forward you've taken rather than like Melusine. Nox Suzaku. So similar to Golbez, can play a 4-cost, which is really nice, but it reveals top 3 cards and play a forward of 4 or less among them onto the field, but anything it doesn't play is put from the field into the break zone. So you could potentially be a couple of turns, you could mill yourself 3 cards into the break zone. So just be careful. Alright, Tama. Love Tama. Just to be able to give any character back attack basically is great. She's also really good for mind games. So she says, pay X and I'll put Tama into the break zone. Play 1 character card of cost X or less from your hand onto the field. So you could be in a particular element matchup and you pay, let's go with mono worth. So let's say you pay 7. Your opponent probably assumes you're going to be playing Shantoto or Titan or Shadow Lord, and then you play something else like, I don't know, the 6-cost wall to then play a Mobius onto the field. Because the good thing is you can play something of cost X or less, so it doesn't have to be the exact cost. And so what you can do is bait your opponent into maybe preparing for something that isn't actually going to happen, or wasting their resources, and ultimately you just bring in something. Now you do have to overpay it annoyingly to be able to do something like that, but either way, the best thing about this is you can change up your tactics as well. You might intentionally like pay 7 to play something like Shantoto, and then you actually no, I don't want to do that now because he's going to cancel it. He's just managed to get a, I don't know, Amaterasu from the break zone, so actually I'm going to play something else instead without an entry effect. So yeah, you can chop and change on the fly. Zidane. So it could be a case of you cast 2 things, but you actually have to cast 3 things, and then in your attack phase you've cast 3 things, and then maybe you've attacked with a forward or something like that. You then bring in Zidane with Tama. You then take the top card of your opponent's deck, and then you can attack with Zidane as well because you've cast 3 things. The thing is, playing Tama or playing Zidane onto the field with Tama doesn't count as a cast, it counts as a play, so you have to cast 3 other things, so be mindful of that. But what I do like about this is that, let's say your opponent puts a card on top of their deck that they want to keep there, so let's say they did the did the Sahagin Golbez thing that I mentioned previously. Look at the top 2 cards. Oh, I want to keep this one there, but the other card at the bottom. And then before Golbez's effect would trigger, you then break Tama to bring in Zidane. You then steal that top card so they don't get it onto the field. But something like that, you know, they could have put their own Tidus back onto the top of their deck to, you know, put your forwards on top of the decks, and they get to draw cards and stuff like that. So there's loads of different things they can do. Oh no, they get to put it at the bottom of the deck, don't they? There are things they can put on top of their deck, so just be mindful of that, and you can use Zidane to get rid of it. Alphino. Really good card. Now, obviously, your opponent doesn't want to take you to 5, but if they're going to take or beat you through damage, they have to take you to 5, but normally they'll run you down from 4 to 7. So when your opponent does take you to 5, you then break Tama to play Alphino onto the field, to then play something else onto the field as well, which is really good. And it's a 4 cost as well, so chances are it'll be something substantial. And you also get to draw 2 cards to discard 1, which isn't the worst thing in the world either. Obviously, if you've got Tama open, then it's fairly obviously going to play something, but the best thing about Tama is your opponent doesn't know what. Zeramus. So let's say it's your opponent's turn, maybe you've got a bit of a stalemate going on, you can't attack, your opponent can't attack, neither of you going anywhere, and your opponent goes to pass their turn, you then break Tama to play Zeramus onto the field. If they still pass their turn, all their forwards go dull, and hopefully you can still attack through and win. Jekt. Now this is stupid, but I love it. So when Jekt enters the field, choose 1 forward. If 1 or more forwards were attacking this turn, return the chosen forward to its owner's hand. If 3 or more forwards were attacking this turn, break the chosen forward and draw 1 card instead. Doesn't matter who the owner of those forwards were that were attacking, just as long as 3 have attacked, your opponent could attack with 3 forwards, and then they go to pass turn. You then bring Jekt onto the field with Tama. You get to choose a forward, break it, and draw a card. And what's even better is that your opponent could, I don't know, maybe they've got a summon and then an ability, and then you've responded to something, and then they've responded to something. You could use Tama to bring Jekt onto the field, and then Jekt block to get rid of all their effects from the stack, which is stupid and expensive, but amazing. If that ever happens, I will just die then and there. Golbez, again, similar to Alphino as well. Your opponent, if they're going to beat you with damage, they have to take you to damage 6. You go to damage 6, you then break Tama to bring in Golbez to then play the Archfiends onto the field. Job's a good one. lightning. So just maybe you're in a position again where you're maybe stalemating a bit, your opponent's attacking through, so you've got some slightly bigger forwards though, and you lose a forward, then they've got more forwards than you do. Remember, you have to have, technically, when you want to play lightning, a 2 forward deficit, because when you play lightning, you then obviously would go to 1 less, which is the minimum you could have for lightning to take an effect. So yeah, just making sure that you can play lightning onto the field to actually get to remove something. And again, Tama can play a forward of literally any element, so you can be a mono earth, you've got 1 forward, your opponent's got 3, you play lightning onto the field, remove it. Lightning! So obviously lightning, you normally would have to pay 1 for each card in your opponent's hand, but Tama just looks at the written cost of the card. So you break Tama, you pay 1, you bring in lightning, hopefully your opponent's got no cards, hopefully you've got no cards, and you haste her and deal your opponent 2 points of damage and you win. Zidane, yeah, again, similar sort of thing. Maybe opponent, or similar sort of thing to the Zidane I mentioned at the beginning. So your opponent is playing something like Al Cid, and you know they're going to play something like Zaramus or the Opus 18 Sephiroth onto the field. You then respond by breaking time and bring in Zidane, steal that card from their hand, and make sure they can't play it. Alright, Arc. So I'll go over his effect because he's relatively new. When Arc enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 fire, earth, or water card among them to your hand, and return the other cards to the bottom deck in any order. If there are 4 or more different elements among the forwards you control, the forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power. It's a 4 costs, 7k, EX burst, win forward. Melusine. So Melusine enters the field, take control of your opponent's forwards. You now have Arc, Melusine, and another forward. Provided the forward isn't lightning or wind, then you now have 3 forwards. Obviously, you have to make Melusine a forward for it to count towards Arc, but maybe you've got Arc and let's go with Raffia, and then you play Melusine onto the field, take control of a fire forward. You then make Melusine a forward. All your forwards now gain plus 2,000. Bart's fairly obvious this one, but when Bart enters the field, you can make him any other element, and that then counts towards Arc. Yuri, yeah, the obvious one, right? So Yuri has every element except for Dark, so you play Arc onto the field, you play Yuri onto the field, and everything is now plus 10k. So yeah, that's quite nice. But you play that with Luso, and all of a sudden you've got some big forwards that can deal some serious damage. Because obviously, if you have 5 or more elements, if you have 3 or more elements among the forwards you control, then Luso gains First Strike and Brave, and if you have 5 more elements, then when Luso attacks, he deals your opponent point damage. But the problem with that was that Luso was always pretty small anyway, unless you run him in a Golbez deck, at which point he'd probably be quite big as well. However, now with Yuri, Luso, and Arc on the field, that's all you need, and Luso will be a 9k forward, because you gain 1 from Yuri, 1 from Arc, and then 2 from Arc's effects, because Yuri fulfills the element stuff. So Luso now can attack as a 9k first striker with Brave. Obviously, bear in mind he doesn't have haste. Deal a point of damage, and also pretty big, so your opponent probably doesn't want to block him as well. Raffia. Fairly obvious, but Raffia onto the field to then search and play Arc onto the field, reveal top cards of your deck, maybe get yourself a Faris, play Faris onto the field, deal stupid amounts of damage, or get Luneth, actually. Luneth onto the field, give Raffia haste, maybe you've now got 4 Warriors of Light, she attacks, you remove something. Nice. Gilgamesh. So the good thing about Arc is that you aren't required to run him in a Warriors of Light deck. His job might be Warrior of Light, but none of his abilities actually really pertain just to Warriors of Light, so you could be in a pretty decent multi-element deck, and something like Gilgamesh obviously likes multi-element. So yeah, being able to have it so that even you've got loads of multi-element on your field as well as in your break zone, you're still getting a benefit somewhere. If you have Arc on the field and you're getting his plus 2k buff with Gilgamesh on the field with all the elements in the break zone, he is then a 10k haste first strike Brave that can attack 3 times and will dull and freeze a character every time he attacks. Or yeah, that's just, no, that's horrible. Golbez. Yeah, break Golbez, search 4 things of different elements, play them on the field. All of a sudden, Arc is now, well, all those forwards are now huge alongside Arc. And if you play the Barbarisha of 2 CP, then she can search another Golbez in the turn and play them onto the field as well. So even more forwards of different elements. And Ardyn. So yeah, I mean, I've already gone over Ardyn before. Didn't really do too many combos with him, so we'll look at a few more different cards that he works nicely with. Gilgamesh, fairly obvious. Put Gilgamesh in the break zone, break something, you then get to play something of 5 CP or less. Bear in mind that it cannot become 0, so even another 5 CP forward you need to pay 1 for. But either way, Gilgamesh into the break zone, which works nicely with a lot of the Gilgameshes because they like having lots of Gilgameshes in the break zone, to then play that onto the field. Zach, so when he's put from the field into the break zone, you can search for a card named Cloud, of course 4 or less, and add to your hand, you can play it onto the field dull. So you can basically play it onto the field dull, or you can pay 1 to play it onto the field active, which I think is a perfectly fine trade. VV, put him in the break zone, deal damage to something, make your next card cost -5. Not bad. Axis. This is a bit of a strange one as well, because when he enters the field, you put the top 3 cards of your deck into the break zone, but ultimately you put him into the break zone, choose a forward other than card name Axis in your break zone, add it to your hand. So he's your way to be able to search back, or sorry, retrieve back some really important cards, and making them cost -5 and then get something back from the break zone play onto the field is really useful. And in Lightning Fire, let's go with, I don't know, BFA off the top of my head. You put Axis into the break zone to get yourself a BFA and play that onto the field for only 2 CP. That's not too shabby. Cloud, so obviously Cloud can dull and put a 7 forward into the break zone to search another forward of 1 CP more and play that onto the field. But you can then also play another forward onto the field. So let's say Cloud put a 3 CP into the break zone to then play the 4 cost Light Aerith onto the field to get you back 2 7 characters from your break zone, add them to your hand. You can then play onto the field for -5. Not too bad. Ultros, because you're going to force a Lightning Fire Ardyn into an Ultros deck, but ultimately put Ultros into the break zone, choose a forward, it's -5k. You can then pay 1 water to go get yourself another Ultros and play it onto the field for -5. Not bad. Magic Pot, probably my favorite card of the game. I'm not sure. I just think this card is one of those cards where with every reprint, or not reprint of character, but the more cards a particular character gets, the better this card becomes. And I absolutely love this card. So yeah, Earth Dull, put into break zone, choose a forward without the generic symbol. You get to search one forward with the same name, play it onto the field. Firstly, putting that forward into the break zone alongside Magic Pot is part of the cost, so your opponent cannot respond to that. So you pay the Earth Dull Magic Pot, put that and the forward into the break zone. That's already happened. Your opponent can respond to the effect, but that forward is going into the break zone if you can pay for Magic Pot's effect. And what's also great about Magic Pot is it plays onto the field active. So, you know, most effects these days bring them in dull. This one doesn't. So Sin into Sin. So you're in the right elements to be able to hopefully set up Giga Graviton, with wind and earth being fairly protective elements anyway. But ultimately, yeah, you put Wind Sin into the break zone to bring in the big old boy Sin from Opus 7, and then you should have the cards in hand to be able to immediately Giga Graviton, and your opponent has to deal with the fact that they just lost all their forwards and monsters. Obviously, you have to take a point of damage, and you will have just lost all your forwards and monsters as well. But you bring Sin onto the field and then immediately Giga Graviton. Your opponent has to respond to that straight away, which admittedly isn't the hardest thing to do anymore, but still, that's something they have 1 turn to find that answer. So if you manage to put your opponent in a position where they don't have a break zone and they don't have any cards in hand because you've got things like Zidane and Arciela removing things from the break zone, so yeah, lots of nice ways to be able to hamper their ability to be able to retrieve stuff, whilst also hopefully setting up to protect yourself through things like, I don't know, Unsang Ganashi, for example. So yeah, that's what we'll do. Giga Graviton. Aranea and Aranea. So the little one, obviously she can reveal a lightning card off the top of your deck and add that to your hand. If you are in Earth or Lightning, then there is a chance she could miss, so be careful of that. But, you know, maybe you're just running a splash of Earth and you're playing the monsters onto the field with something like Urianger. Either way, you can break the little Aranea to put into the break zone to then play the big Aranea to then break something at damage 5. She can break 2 things, which is really, really good. What I really like about this is, let's say you've got the big Aranea on the field, you could attack with her, chance your opponent's not going to block, she's first strike in 9k, you can then use Magic Pot to put Aranea into the break zone to then replay the same Aranea, hopefully break something, and then she can attack again. As I mentioned before, it comes into the field active, so you can, as many Magic Pots as you have, replay as many forwards with haste of the same name. Ildnash, this is funny. So if the Ildnash leaves the field, return Ildnash to your hand instead. So you can put Magic Pot into the break zone, put Ildnash in the break zone, she goes into the break zone, then goes immediately to your hand, and then you can put, you can go and find yourself another Ildnash, play that onto the field, and immediately Paradise. Yeah. The Oracle of Light. So Oracle Light goes into the break zone. You then remove from the game to then play yourself a sign from the break zone onto the field, probably the Big Ishtola, to then to play another forward from your break zone, play that onto the field, and then you also get to set yourself another Oracle Light, play that back onto the field as well. So you've still kept that plus 2k buff on your forwards, but you've also amassed like probably 3 or 4 extra forwards anyway. Spiritus, so not specifically Spiritus, although you could do, I wouldn't really advise it, but more of a using Magic Pot to put a Dark Forward into the break zone to then trigger Spiritus, which is when a Dark Forward other than Spiritus you control is put from the field into the break zone, choose up to 1 forward, remove it from the game. So yeah, obviously Veritas. You put Veritas into the break zone with Magic Pot and Spiritus onto the field, which point you could then go set yourself another Veritas, but the order you stack it in makes a difference. So you'd want it to be Magic Pot first, then Veritas, and then Spiritus. And all these effects trigger at the same point because all of them are being triggered from Veritas going into the break zone, which is the payment for Magic Pot, so it all can be stacked however you want it. So you'd go Magic Pot, Veritas, Spiritus. Spiritus then removes something, Veritas then makes your opponent puts a character in the break zone, and then Magic Pot resolves to search yourself another Veritas to play that back onto the field, and then your opponent puts a forward they control into the break zone. So you've got rid of a total of a lot of characters. Now the chances are if your opponent has 2 forwards, then they will put the second forward they control into break zone from Veritas' effect. So when the second Veritas enters the field, there's nothing to break from his entry. But still, it's made your opponent lose all their forwards. Well, their 2 forwards. Lightning. This is great. I love this card. So when she enters the field, you can choose up to 2 forwards your opponent controls or forwards in your break zone, remove them from the game, and then when Lightning leaves the field, return each card removed from Lightning's effect to its owner's hand. So basically, she can enter the field, choose 2 forwards, you can then break her, put her back in your hand, whatever, make her leave the field in some way before her first entry effect is resolved, and that means her second effect will then trigger. But there are no cards currently removed from her effect, so that fizzles, and then the forwards that get removed from the first entry effect are then gone forever. So not too bad. But the best thing about this is that you can put Lightning onto the field, immediately break her to go search another of this Lightning, so you can make it so that 2 forwards are permanently removed and 2 of them are removed whilst Lightning is on the field. Cloud. Yeah, so let's say you played Cloud onto the field, you gave everything haste, and you played a Avalanche operative of 4 or less onto the field. Nice. They can both now attack. You can then put Magic Pot into the break zone to then search another of this Cloud to then get another operative of 4 or less onto the field and give everything haste and attack again with those 2. So not too bad. But to be honest, just being able to deal 10k to 2 different things, I'm alright with that, to be honest. Ingrid, so when she's put from the field into the break zone, remove all the characters in your opponent's break zone from the game. If 5 or more cards are removed from the game by this effect, draw 1 card. So just a nice way to be able to empty opponent's break zone without having to use something like Mist Dragon. I say empty, only characters, not summons, unfortunately. And yeah, you potentially get to draw a card as well, but then you also get to bring another Ingrid onto the field, which means that she is still a threat if your opponent does start to fill their break zone up again. Zach, so when he's put from the field to the break zone, you can play a character of 7 character, from your hand onto the field. If it is cost 5 or more, Zach deals your opponent damage. To be honest, that's probably worth it if you're playing something huge, but to be honest, these days, CP cost isn't indicative of how good a card is. So chances are you could be playing a much smaller card, to be honest. And what's best is you get to play another Zach onto the field as well. So you've still got that lingering threat of I can play something for free, whilst also having played something for free. And Ardyn, because yeah, you use Magic Pot to put something in the break zone to then play that onto the field, but then the next thing you play is also -5 CP to play, so not bad. And there we go. All done and dusted. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for the support and just the fact that you guys have been enjoying this stuff for the past few years has been crazy to me, but I'm very glad that you've all enjoyed it. Thank you to the guys at Square Enix as well for all the spoilers and things I've got to be a part of as well. It's been really, really cool. As you can probably tell from the tone of my voice, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break, but not really. Doing these videos takes a long time. I have to think about what 5 cards I'm going to feature. I then have to think about their viability. Like, really, are these cards that worth talking about? Because I've done some videos where I really shouldn't have talked about those particular cards because they're trash. And then I have to try and like find what are the actual interesting combos with those cards. And then sometimes I can go so down the rabbit hole, there might be like one little inconsistency with another card, and I make a mistake with that one, and I think it works with this effect when it doesn't. And there is a lot of time and effort that goes into these videos, as well as the editing and the creating of these the slideshow as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, but that doesn't mean say I want to stop. I was a little deluded in thinking that I could keep on making these videos even on a weekly basis, especially with a newborn baby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and keep these to a monthly show. So I don't know when exactly, because as of recording this, the 9th of January. So I'm probably going to go with maybe the beginning of the month or the end of the month. If I go with the end of the month, I give myself a lot more time, because it wouldn't be January, it would be February the next card combo show would come out. But I still want to keep doing these videos, but having more time to be able to prepare these videos means that, one, the quality should be better, but two, I have more time to actually take in the cards and see what I can do with them, rather than having to think, oh, I need to put out a video. So yeah, I will still keep making these videos. I will just make them less regular. I will, however, up how many card profiles I'll be doing, because card profile videos are fairly easy for me to do. I'm making decks on FFDecks anyway, just for my locals, or just because I've got some spare time. And yeah, it's a lot easier to do that. The one reason I prefer doing card combo shows is because I can focus on a particular card and then show in multitude of different elements and scenarios that you can do things with it. But in a deck, you're kind of limited, but the deck videos are much easier to work with, and it also gives you the kind of skeleton or chassis of what you can do with it as well, because you might look at the deck I've built and be like, well, I'll take those cards out and these cards out and then put something else in there instead. But you've at least kind of maybe got a combo in mind within that deck. So that's probably going to be my route from now. I'm going to say the streams are continuing. I haven't done a stream for ages, but I'm going to try and continue the streams, or resume the streams / let's play videos. But yeah, so the card combo show isn't going on hiatus. It's just going to be slowing down a little bit so I can try and make better videos. But regardless, thank you everyone so much for these past 3 years and watching these videos and paying attention to me. And yeah, anyway, stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video.